Matt Holman is a partner and board member of construction and property consultants Gardiner and Theobald, or G&T as they're more familiarly known. And Matt also leads on the firm's Mass Timber Office Forum, which brings together experts from across the industry to discuss and debate the barriers of using mass timber in office construction. So Matt, perhaps we can just start. Should we all be talking about mass timber rather than CLT or cross-laminated timber?
Well, good morning, Peter, and thanks for having me. Yes, I mean, so CLT is part of what we've been looking at. It's much wider than just CLT. CLT being obviously cross-laminated timber, which a number of people are aware of and are familiar with being used for floor slabs in the office context and sometimes in residential for wall construction, etc. But it's wider than that. It's glue lam, like the stuff above me. So glue laminated timber, which is which is timber glued in the same plane as opposed to cross-laminated, which again should be familiar to a lot of professional people in the UK. It's typically pine or spruce, but it's used to form columns and beams, and we've been using it for years now in sports facilities, schools, etc. But one of the other aspects is LVL, which is laminated veneer lumber. Again, this is used mainly for structural means, for frames, etc. And they're the three main areas we've been looking at. There are some others that are out there, but that's what we've been looking at. But in our forum, we've consistently concluded pretty much with each panel that hybrid is often the most advantageous solution. For example, insurers take more comfort in having a concrete core in that regard, or indeed technically, say we've our project at Google at King's Cross where the frame is more traditional to achieve larger spans with a CLT timber floor. So, you know, it's definitely a very wide and sophisticated topic.
So in spite of the fact that we've been using timber for, well, thousands of years as a building material, mass timber is being perceived as an innovative material, and also that it's risky to use. But the science suggests otherwise, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, as we all know, timber's been used as a base building material for centuries. But in the modern world, timber has been less common in sectors such as offices, which has been the main basis of our forum. But it's, the technology for mass timber has grown significantly over the last couple of decades, and indeed, it's innovative. It's a more refined product. It can achieve greater weight-bearing capacities now, greater spans, and with a drive for sustainability, it's a useful material, and the material itself sequesters carbon. On your risk point, though, the perception is that timber performs poorly in a fire condition, for example, and hopefully our fire panel has demonstrated it's like any other material that it has limitations, and so long as the designs and it's tested appropriately, the material will satisfy regulations. So yeah, it's definitely high on the agenda right now, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, well, certainly mass timber is going to be really important if we are going to reduce the embodied energy in new building. And your forum suggests a doubling or even tripling of its use over the next 20 years. So we're starting from a pretty low base. So is that going to have a much impact? And actually, do we have the capacity to deliver it?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the word capacity, because that was the main premise behind what we were trying to get over, really. Yes, there is a low base in the UK, but the UK is a fraction of the mass timber economy in, say, Europe and indeed the world. I think it's fair to say that doubling or tripling comment that was made in the panel was pretty much a subjective opinion of one of our panelists, and who's to say it won't be much greater than that. The point we try to get over is that the capacity and the renewable nature of the material is vast. And don't forget that timber has high levels of sequestered carbon, and as this is more recognised, this may also increase the uptake of timber. So it is a relatively low base now, but certainly on projects that we're considering, it's definitely part of early feasibility studies now, where it used to be considered later down the line of a project. It's right at the forefront now, so it's definitely being considered front end. So you should see more of it coming through.
And with companies now focused, I mean, more than ever on ESG outcomes, are office agents and occupiers enthusiastic, do you think, about the use of mass timber in offices?
Well, definitely. I mean, that was one of our really good panels. We did a panel with all the agents, and it demonstrated that, you know, tenants, funders, and the like are all very ESG focused, and as a result, welcome timber as a building material, and hence developers are considering it as part of their feasibility studies for projects. The other impact that also came from the forum was the well-being aspects of timber. It makes you feel good. People like the aesthetic, the touch and feel of it, and it's proven to have a positive impact on the environment of the space, sitting with humidity levels, etc. And the fact that organisations such as Google and Sky have built their own spaces using timber for their own occupation, i.e. their own staff and the well-being of their own staff, I think pretty much says it all. So yeah, it's definitely on the rise. And the funding point, I mean, I was reading the Financial Times on the way in this morning, and there was another piece in there about funders really pushing this agenda on sustainability side. So there's definitely a funding requirement. There's a tenant to drive, and it's almost making it a little bit easier for developers to satisfy that market.
You mentioned the fire issue, and your group, when discussing fire, was pretty well unanimous in suggesting that it was really urgent to create a dedicated standard to enable mass timber construction to be generally adopted. I mean, how do you actually get something like that to happen?
Well, a good question. I mean, what we try to do is raise awareness, stress the need for education, and collaboration is obviously key. We don't have all the answers, obviously, but what we can try to do is bring people together. We've had over 60 experts on our 10 sessions, and there's already lots of movement in the industry. For example, the insurers have come together, and you'll see some bits on our white paper in relation to that. Developers have created their own forums, and in time, regulators will start to bespoke standards for timber products, undoubtedly. I mean, there's obviously a regulation that doesn't say, you know, it's got to be concrete or steel or timber, but with timber, there is a need for a bit more refinement on those regulations, and that's what we're trying to suggest would be helpful. So there's clearly a demand there. There's clearly a requirement to, you know, push the sustainability agenda. We just need governmental and regulatory help to help, you know, facilitate that and push it on. Testing, for example, is another area whereby different projects and different developers are doing tests here, there, and everywhere. Well, if we started to pull that data together to facilitate that, then it makes life simpler for everyone. And as you started the conversation here, the barriers can start to be broken down, which is what we're looking to try and assist.
Yes, I noticed going past the Google site there, as you mentioned, lots of timber and concrete and some steel as well in the construction. What are the projects we should be looking out for across London that are going to be exemplars in delivering designs with mass timber in them?
Well, Google's clearly a flagship project, and you just have to come into St Pancras, and it's a fantastic concept anyway, and it's a huge building. The black and white building is another one. We've also pointed to a number of projects around the world in our forum. So there's projects in Toronto and the like, in Milan, that are all worthy of people clicking on and having a look. So yeah, there's a number there, Peter, and I know there's a number on the drawing board that, for obvious reasons, we can't talk about, but there are a number there that I think are going to be pretty eye-catching around London.
Very good. Well, we look forward to see them being built and you know, finding out how it all works and experiencing them. So thank you very much, Matt, for your insights, and look forward to meeting up soon.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Thanks for your time.